Well, this is a very important story, and when it comes to your child's education, it turns out that the Texas State Board of Education is a big factor for all of us, even if you don't live in Texas. The Lone Star State buys or distributes 48 million textbooks every year, which basically dictate to educational publishers what should be written in those textbooks. As part of a week-long series on the Texas textbook war, Shannon Bream is live with us in Washington with more. So, Shannon, is there, really any bigger influence on textbooks in the country these days?
Well, you know, Martha, it used to be that California and Texas called the shots because they were the biggest buyers of textbooks. So, of course, publishers wanted to write books that Texas and California would buy. Well, a number of people within the industry tell me now that financial woes in the state of California have forced it to cut back on purchases. So they say, you know, you won't hear an executive in the publishing industry saying this publicly, but basically Texas is calling the shots. So they're going through votes this week about curriculum and textbooks, what's in, what's out this week in Texas. And like you said, that's going to wind up impacting millions of kids in almost every state in the U.S. because these books drafted for Texas sell nationwide, Martha.
Yeah, all right, so they have all this influence. Who benefits from that?
Well, you know, there will be people testifying and making suggestions to the State Board of Education in Texas, a lot of them very vocal. Well, I talked with Gilbert Sewell, who is the director of the American Textbook Council, about who gets their way when it comes to these textbooks. Here's what he said.
Long ago, an editor at McGraw-Hill told me the squeaky wheels got the attention, and what was true then is even more true today.
Now, Sewell says there are many groups that have essentially forced their way into textbooks by taking over some of these debates. He says, in his opinion, what he calls the Christian right has been the most successful in Texas. That certainly seems to be a dividing line for a lot of people there in the Lone Star State. Accusations flying back and forth about who's trying to strip out all mentions of religion and who's trying to make sure that it's in these books about our American history. That's one of the hot topics, Martha.
Oh, that is a hot topic indeed. So the textbook industry says that really this has all changed really for the worse over the years. Why is that?
Yeah, they say that it's come down to identity politics about what winds up in these books, primarily history books. It used to be that publishers had historians or educators who actually wrote the books, but now instead of them having some pride of authorship, people are taking the curriculum guidelines, those that are going to be voted on in Texas this week, for instance, and they quickly crank out a book that matches those. Here's what Dr. Frank Wang, a former textbook publisher, told us about the process.
Putting together a textbook is more of a engineering, mass production, assembly line process rather than what you would kind of think it to be of an artisan, of a sculptor, of a painter, you know, somebody who takes time, you know, perfecting their craft and developing, you know, what would be really more of a work of art than.
So if they're writing specifically to these curriculum decisions that happened in Texas, it is so crucial because if you're talking about groups who want to strip out things like Christmas and Paul Revere and Neil Armstrong, you'd think you'd want those in your kids' textbooks and history books, but if they don't wind up in the curriculum guidelines from Texas, they might not wind up in the history book that shows up in your kid's classroom. Martha?
Yeah, these are very slippery issues, and they slip into the curriculum without a lot of parents really noticing what's going on, and then you look in the books and go, what? When you're helping your kids study at night. So it's very important. Shannon, thank you very much for bringing all this to our attention today. Shannon Bream from Washington.
All right. In minutes here, Martha, brand new.